December 29, 1972. A brand new Lockheed L-1011 TriStar jet was descending toward Miami International Airport. On board were 176 passengers and crew, relaxed, tired, and ready to be home for the holidays. But just minutes later, Flight 401 would disappear into the black waters of the Florida Everglades. And in the months that followed, something far stranger began to happen. Pilots and flight attendants across Eastern Airlines started seeing the faces of their dead colleagues appearing on other aircraft. The same model as Flight 401. What really happened that night? And could a plane truly be haunted? It was supposed to be a simple 2-hour flight from New York to Miami. Eastern Airlines. Flight 401 was operating one of the newest, most advanced aircraft in the world, the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar. The company was proud of it. They called it the safest plane ever built. The crew that night was equally professional. Captain Robert Loft, 55, had logged more than 30,000 flying hours. First Officer Albert Stockstill, 39, was known for his calm efficiency. And Flight Engineer Donald Repo, 51, was quiet, meticulous, and deeply respected among his peers. At 9:20 p.m., the aircraft took off from JFK Airport. The weather was calm, the flight uneventful. Passengers chatted softly. The cabin crew served drinks. And outside the windows, the glittering lights of the East Coast faded beneath a clear December sky. It was, by all accounts, a routine flight. Until the final minutes at 11:32 p.m. As Flight 401 approached Miami International, First Officer Stockstill lowered the landing gear. 2 green lights lit up on the instrument panel, 1 for each wing gear. But the third light, confirming the nose gear was locked, stayed dark. The pilots exchanged a look, probably just a faulty bulb, but by procedure, they had to be sure. Captain Loft called the control tower and requested to abort the landing and circle over the Everglades while they checked the issue. The tower approved, and the plane climbed to 2,000 feet, holding its position in a wide loop west of the city. Inside the cockpit, tension rose slightly. Stockstill held the controls while Loft and Repo tried to fix the light. Repo crouched down into the avionics bay, a small space beneath the cockpit floor, to manually check the nose gear's position. The pilots were distracted. Their focus narrowed to a tiny piece of equipment, a single light bulb. And slowly, without anyone realizing, the aircraft began to descend. 11:42 p.m., Stockstill noticed something odd on the altimeter. "We're at 2,000, right?" he asked. "Yeah, 2,000, Captain Loft replied. But they weren't. The plane was dropping 200 feet, 500, 800. The ground below was pitch-black swamp. No city lights to provide visual cues. Seconds later, the altitude warning chime sounded. "Hey, what's happening here?" Stockstill asked, grabbing the yoke. Loft's voice tightened. We're not level." But it was too late. It's at 11:42 p.m. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 slammed into the Florida Everglades at 227 miles per hour. The massive jet tore through the swamp, breaking into pieces across the marshland. The impact was so sudden that many passengers never knew what happened. Of the 176 people on board, 101 died instantly, including Captain Loft and First Officer Stockstill. Flight Engineer Repo was pulled from the wreckage alive, but died later in the hospital. 75 others survived, scattered among the wreckage and alligators of the dark swamp. It was one of the worst aviation disasters in American history. Investigators later concluded that the entire crash had been caused by human error, the crew's fixation on a single burnt-out light bulb. The autopilot had been accidentally disengaged while they were troubleshooting, sending the aircraft slowly downward without anyone noticing. A tragic, preventable accident, or so it seemed. In early 1973, just months after the crash, whispers began to spread among Eastern Airlines crews. Strange things were happening aboard other L-1011 aircraft, especially those built using salvaged parts from Flight 401. See Eastern had recovered some undamaged components from the wreckage, expensive electronics, galley equipment, and even sections of cockpit instruments, and reused them in other planes. That's when the stories began. Flight attendants claimed to see a man's reflection in the galley door, wearing an Eastern uniform, but when they turned, no one was there. Passengers reported chatting with a friendly officer before takeoff, who later vanished mid-conversation. The descriptions were eerily consistent. A tall man, graying hair, kind eyes. He matched the description of Captain Robert Loft. On another flight, a flight engineer performing pre-checks saw a man seated in his jump seat, the fold-down seat used by the third crew member. The man looked up and said, calmly, "There will never be another crash like Flight 401. Then he disappeared. When shown a photo later, the engineer reportedly went pale. It was him, he said. It was Don Repo. By mid-1973, over 20 separate reports of ghost sightings had been made by flight crew and maintenance workers. Most were from highly trained professionals, people not known for superstition or hysteria. One particularly chilling case came from a senior flight attendant on Flight 318. She claimed she saw Captain Loft's face reflected in the cockpit door and that multiple passengers saw it too. When the plane landed, the captain of that flight refused to take the jet up again until the maintenance team performed a full inspection. Eastern Airlines management grew increasingly uncomfortable. They officially denied the rumors, but behind the scenes, they removed every single part salvaged from Flight 401 from all operational aircraft. After that, the sightings reportedly stopped. The story of the ghost flight made national headlines. Newspapers from the Miami Herald to Time magazine covered the bizarre reports. The airline never confirmed anything publicly, but several crew members insisted their experiences were real. Parapsychologists, scientists who study supernatural phenomena were fascinated. One theory suggested that the trauma and sudden death of the crew somehow left a psychic imprint on the salvaged materials. Another theory was simpler. Collective trauma. Hundreds of employees had lost friends and colleagues in the crash. Grief and fear might have sparked mass hallucinations. But not everyone agreed. Several of the crew who had seen the apparitions were not even aware they were flying planes with parts from Flight 401, making suggestion unlikely. One mechanic swore that after seeing Repo's ghost warning him about a malfunction, he checked a system panel and found an electrical fault exactly where the figure had pointed. He fixed it before takeoff and potentially saved hundreds of lives. By the late 1970s, Eastern Airlines wanted the story buried. Crew members were warned not to talk to the press, and anyone caught spreading ghost stories risked suspension. But legends have a way of surviving. In 1978, author John G. Fuller published The Ghost of Flight 401, a best-selling book that documented dozens of eyewitness accounts from pilots, flight attendants, and even passengers. It was later adapted into a television movie that terrified audiences worldwide. The story became a pop culture phenomenon and a symbol of both tragedy and mystery. Even decades later, aviation enthusiasts, paranormal investigators, and skeptics still debate what truly happened after the crash. Was it grief, imagination, or something no one can explain? Nearly 50 years later, parts of the Everglades still hold remnants of Flight 401. The crash changed aviation safety forever, introducing stricter cockpit resource management rules to prevent distractions. Every commercial pilot today is trained on the lesson learned that night. Never let small problems distract you from flying the airplane. But there's one part of the story that training manuals don't mention. Even now, some retired Eastern crew quietly insist that they saw something they can't rationalize. A voice, a reflection, a presence. Many say those ghosts weren't there to haunt, but to protect. As one attendant later said, if the souls of Loft and Repo were still flying, maybe they just wanted to make sure no one else met the same fate. Flight 401's wreckage may be gone, but the legend remains, a haunting reminder that not every tragedy ends when the debris is cleared. Perhaps it's just a story born from trauma and coincidence. Or perhaps it's proof that even in the age of science and steel, some mysteries still soar above reason. What do you believe? Were the ghosts of Flight 401 real, or just the imagination of a grieving airline? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more mysteries from history, psychology, crime, and the unexplained. Because sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.